Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of By the Numbers. This is Ken McCusick, joined with my co-host Dan Rees. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you, Ken?
Can't complain except for those terrible games today. So we just got finished watching the Sunday games and talking about that during the production meeting. That was a truly awful set of games and about as bad as a combined result there you can have by watching NFL game mix at the same time.
Yeah,
See
it
Deshaun
was.
Watson's fumble and the
It was a rough ending to a lot of those games. So not great as a Ravens fan.
there it
So
was. All right, well, let's get into the numbers. I'll start this week, and my number is zero point 0.9. That is Griffin's average net yards per dropback versus the Steelers. He had 33 yards passing, which is not good, but he also had 20 yards in sacks, 13 passing yards net on 15 plays, zero point 0.9 per play. The offensive line contributed to that number. A lousy day for the receivers, it seemed, but I think it's actually a little bit difficult to judge the receivers in a game like this.
yeah, I think it was real difficult to see what you had on offense in this game. My number is 27. Builds off of that. It's completed air yards for the Ravens in Week 12. So it wasn't just Griffin. Both quarterbacks didn't throw the ball deep at all. 27 completed air yards. Unbelievably, that's only fourth worst in 2020. There were three teams that actually had less than 27 air yards. One also happened in Week 12 with Denver with the ultimate backup quarterback, where he had
Mm-hmm.
completed one completed pass for -3 yards. The second lowest was Washington football team for 9 air yards. That was when Kyle Allen and Alex Smith stepped in. And then week 10 for New Orleans had 23 air yards, and that was when Breeze got injured. So,
So Taysom Hill was in for a half that game or for a portion of that game.
yeah, it was Taysom actually didn't he wasn't the backup that game. It was the other guy. Jameis Winston.
Okay.
He actually was the backup during that game, and he threw, and then they switched to Taysom. So anyway, ended up with 110 total yards, so 83 yards after catch, mostly on Hollywood's play, but just a real difficult situation like you were talking about, and difficult defense to face, backup QB situation. It just, kind of leads me to question. I think a lot of us may have been confident with RG3 in the backup quarterback role. I'm not so sure how many people are that confident anymore.
Yeah, well, it's obviously not an issue anymore with RG3 right now. Trace McSorley, who has the highest passer rating in the entire NFL for any quarterback, I think it's fairly clear we're not that thrilled about that, and I think there's a great deal of very legitimate fear going into Dallas about him being the starting quarterback. I'll go into my next number. It's 0.24. That's the aggregate raw score by my system at right tackle versus the Steelers. So that means they got 24% of the points on blocks. And to give you an idea, an adjusted 0.60 would get them a D minus. So this is such a fall off the table result. It was effectively uniform between Phillips and Fluker. They were both in the 20s. And it really underscores the problem the Ravens have is an interesting one because they have five guys now they could choose from at right tackle. By the way, interior offensive line is similar, but we're just going to focus on right tackle here. They have five guys they can choose from, I think. Fluker and Phillips, who obviously didn't get it done last game. McCary, who had one good half against New England. Holden, who had one good half against Tennessee. And Rogers, who's on the practice squad, but it was a new signee and has not been subject to any of the COVID problems. So they have some difficult choices to make, and it's not like they have significant depth for a team in a COVID year right now. It's just a question of, is it all replacement level depth?
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, I think you saw this kind of coming. Didn't have a ton of tackle depth, and then COVID made it thinner, and we're kind of seeing that hit the Ravens. So unfortunately, I don't love any of those situations, and we're just going to keep seeing tough defenses as the year goes on, and possibly into the playoffs. So, all right, one one of the bright lights on the game that we did see though was 21. That's the forced fumbles by the Ravens so far. That's number one by a mile through week 12. The Browns, Bills, and Falcons are tied in second with 12 each. So 21 versus 12. That's an amazing difference.
Mm-hmm.
However, the Ravens are second in the NFL with 11 fumbles recovered by the defense, and that's actually behind the Panthers, who have 12. You may notice that that means that the fumbles recovered can be higher than the forced fumbles because there are unrecovered or unforced fumbles. So that's why Carolina actually has more recovered fumbles than forced. So, but for that point, the Ravens only have 11 out of 21 plus. So that's just it's not a very high percentage, probably in the bottom third of the league, on recovered fumbles, and it really makes you think about what could have happened if some of those balls bounced a little differently.
Right. Some of the Ravens fumbles are happening on near the sidelines because they have a good high rate in the secondary, and that's caused some bounce out of bounds situations. The forced fumble category is typically led by teams with very dominant pass rushes. They get in, they hammer the ball loose regularly from the backside, from the front side, but out of the quarterback's hands, where it's a much better chance for the defense to recover that ball in the middle of the field, as opposed to it going out of bounds. And they also generally create more fumbles. Ravens are a very odd team in this regard, as you say. But it's we did hear this week that Marlon Humphrey became only the second cornerback in NFL history. Now they've only been keeping records since 1999 on forced fumbles to have 6 forced fumbles in a season. So only he and Charles Tillman have ever done it. Tillman did it twice, but Humphrey having a obviously great year in that respect. All right, I'll move on to my third stat. It's 0-5. That's the record in games where the Ravens had a rooting interest Sunday. It seems like I have been down this road too many times before, settling in for a nice game of Sunday Ticket on either Game Pass or on Game Mix or on Red Zone, and we just get debilitating gut punch after gut punch. We talked all about it a little bit in the open. The Watson fumble at the 2-yard line, the Jets playing that defense that they had to be trying to lose. I mean, they had to be trying to preserve the number 1 pick. And I know they are in trouble. If they win a game, they're in a lot of trouble with Jacksonville getting the number 1 away from them. Jacksonville has a good strength of schedule, I believe it is, tiebreaker that would likely beat them.
Yeah, it was definitely a rough couple fourth quarters there at the end of the early games. So, bummer. I'll hit on some playoff probabilities later on in some of my stats. One of my third stat is 69.4% and 25%. This was another strong part of the game in a rough game to watch. It's the red zone touchdown percentage for the Steelers. 69.4% is their percentage for weeks 1 through 11 going into the game, and 25% was their percentage in week 12. So Ravens defense was able to hold them to 1 touchdown, 2 field goals, and an interception. 69.4% red zone touchdown percentage for the Steelers is 7th best through week 11. So an offense that is very strong, scoring touchdowns in the red zone. The Ravens defense was able to toughen up and hold them to field goal.
Before we get started, if growing an e-commerce business is your focus, you'll need a platform that's focused on growth. That's where Klaviyo comes in. Klaviyo is the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for online brands of all kinds and all sizes. Whether you're just getting started or running a well-known brand, it gives you everything you need to send memorable, branded emails, text messages, and more so you can build strong relationships that keep your customers coming back. With flexible automations, powerful insights, and super precise targeting, Klaviyo is a faster way to turn great ideas into great customer experiences. That's why it's trusted by more than 40,000 brands like Living Proof, Huckberry, and 8 Sleep. In fact, on average, Klaviyo customers see a 41% increase in overall revenue within 5 months. Klaviyo scales with you, so you never have to switch. They support everything from garage startups to iconic billion-dollar brands. Want to learn more about how you can grow your brand with Klaviyo? Visit klaviyo.com/grow to get started with a free trial today. That's klaviyo.com/grow.
Goals or less on 3 out of 4 drives, which was really what enabled the game to stay close. And it's kind of surprising because going into the game, Baltimore defense had allowed 69.2% touchdowns, which was 7th worst. So it wasn't our strong suit going into it, but they really held strong. So
I guess it wasn't the regular defense either. But the
That's
other
true.
thing to say is that the Steelers had some of that was self-inflicted with drops. I think that they probably had a chance to score once or twice more. The Ravens did do some nice things. Humphrey made 2 passes defensed in the end zone. It's not like I want to take anything away from the defense because they played their hearts out to keep the Ravens in that game. All right, my next number is 0. That's the number of missed snaps by Chuck Clark this season. The Ravens' defensive signal caller is questionable for Dallas. It's one position where the Ravens have absolutely no depth, kind of like offensive tackle, beyond the big two of Clark and Elliott. Have been remarkably fortunate. They've played virtually every snap. Clark has, but Elliott's been very close for the entire year. And the Ravens don't have another guy. I really don't know who they would put back there. I don't think Jimmy Smith would be a good candidate to hold out for an entire game back there. I guess could be one of the new cornerbacks, but could be Geno Stone if he's back in time, but I don't believe he will be for this game. So it'd be interesting to see what they do if they can't play. It might be Chris Board playing a strong safety role where you always play single high and you never play a 2 up top. Anyway, definitely both players got dinged up against the Steelers. They were both down at different times during the game. But Clark, obviously, and Elliott, both essential pieces of the Ravens defense going forward.
Yeah, not only has Chuck Clark been great defensively, but he's also got that green dot. So, you can't even. It's hard to measure all of the impact losing him would have. And then to think about that even further, the way Elliott hits and makes plays so violently, he's one play from missing.
Don't you think they should have had that discussion with him already? Like basically told him, you got to lay off a little bit.
Right?
You got to be a little. They tell it to cornerbacks and they tell it to offensive tackles not to cut block. But it's for cornerbacks. They've told Raven cornerbacks in the past, just don't approach a pile. If you see a multi-person pile up, do not be the third man in. And Chris McAllister was kind of selectively physical, despite being a big physical defensive back. So we've seen it in the past.
I think he may take a little while for him to learn and break the tendencies, but it's pretty rough to watch. It's like was the Green Bay Packer the guy we got from the Packers? Did he have safety depth?
Tramon Williams had played safety before, but now he's hurt.
Oh, okay.
So he's out for this game. Yeah.
All right, scratch that. Okay, next number 4.9. That's the yards per carry allowed by the Cowboys defense, tied for worst in the NFL. And actually, it's 4.9 is also the yards per attempt by the Ravens on offense. So that's tied for 5th with for best in the NFL, tied for 5th with the Titans. 4 teams are tied in first with average of 5.0. So hopefully the strength of the Ravens offense can match against the weakness of the Cowboys defense, and we can move the ball well there because we got some question marks on the passers, which we already discussed.
So can you explain to folks why, if the Cowboys give up 4.9 yards per play and the Ravens give up 4.9 yards per play, you still need another piece of information to say if the Ravens should have more than 4.9 or less than 4.9 yards per carry in terms of expected versus the Cowboys?
Sure, yeah, you definitely would have a higher. So it's just if they both have 4.9, you'd expect it to be higher because 4.9 yards allowed by the Cowboys defense is against the average, combined all the opponents that they've faced. So that would be against an average offense. So 4.9 so that defense against a strong offense, you'd expect it to give more. So you'd expect those two combined to be higher than 4.9, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, me too. Okay, good stat. Let's see. I'll go on to my last one here, which is 9. That is the number of Ravens still on the COVID list. There's multiple layers to this. The guys on the COVID list first are Andrews, Terrell Bonds, Morgan Cox, Jackson, Judon, Matabike, Ricard, Snead, and Stone. So it's still a formidable list of players led by Jackson and Andrews, obviously there. I don't know if the Ravens are capable of a run. I just don't. And I'm not going to qualify that statement because I don't know if they can beat Dallas with Trace McSorley. I don't know if they're going to be good when these guys get back. I still have concerns, even though Humphrey seemed to get over it pretty quickly, that all these players are going to be themselves again after coming off the COVID list. But in any case, it's even if they have everyone off in time for the Browns, and even if they cobble together a win versus Dallas somehow, or even if they win convincingly, honestly, versus Dallas, I'm going to be concerned about the matchup with the Browns, given all the additional players that will be just coming off and playing their first game.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough matchup, and we'll see how how the people filling in play. I think we'll see how these people coming off the list, how it works out. So it's definitely going to be a lot of waiting, and seeing how the next couple games play out. My last number is 27%. That was the playoff probability leverage for the Ravens based on win-loss in Week 13. That was based on ESPN Football Power Index. And what the playoff probability leverage is, it's the difference between the playoff probability with a win versus with a loss. So 27% difference in the playoff probability depending on the Ravens' outcome in Week 13. So how they do against Dallas. All of this was before any of the results, which Week 13, which we talked about. Before any of the results, we were sitting at around 77% chance of making the playoffs. It's probably dropped pretty significantly based off of all of the results going against us. But let's get this win this week and see where we can go from there.
Yeah, I would agree completely on that, and that maybe it's dropped to say in the low 60s or 65% maybe now after those results of today. Some of them were expected, others were not. But if it is 65, let's say, do you think that the leverage of the game has gone up or down? Because obviously the absolute number has dropped, but when you have a lower absolute number, maybe you got a little bit less leverage from the game. I would guess the leverage might have gone up too. Is the problem?
Yeah, or it stayed around the same and just the range dropped. I think it's still a huge game because the probability drops significantly if we lose to any of the opponents other than the Browns, because that's kind of built into all the models as an assumption. So the Ravens are significant favorites in every game other than the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
So those are assumed in any model. You'll see that those are wins. So any loss would drop the percentage significantly, I think.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there is any tiebreaker advantage they might gain by losing to Dallas that would be a conference record tiebreaker
Yeah.
if they were go on the roll and win the remaining four. But there may not be anybody that they can beat out in that still.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right.
So.
All right. Always a pleasure to do this with you, Dan, and we'll talk to you next time on By the Numbers.